Another week, another episode. I'm Kibben, your resident hater, and I am here to bring you a dang good time. This season was inspired by the Sublime song, Girls Just Want to Have Fun, except with an HR twist because I'm clearly a dork. So it's employees just want blank. And today we're filling in the blank with to feel certain. So put it all together and what do you get? And sorry, I couldn't help myself. Employees just want to feel certain. What does that mean? And who do we have on deck to chat about it? Well, joining me today is Kat Kibben. Kat Kibben is a keynote speaker and recruiting expert that teaches hiring teams how to fix recruiting issues that make hiring hard. As a founder of 3 Ears Media, they train teams to deliver human-centered hiring solutions that reduce time to fill and improve quality of hire. Named a LinkedIn top voice on hiring, Kat has been featured in major outlets like the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and they bring an experience working with companies from Fortune 100s to small businesses. Based in Rockford, Illinois, Kat is also the author of This Was All an Accident, a collection of lessons learned from a year of van life. Kat, welcome.
I am so excited to be here. Longtime fan. It's so good to be here. And especially to talk about something that's like a little outside of my normal wheelhouse.
Mm-hmm. But you've lived it all. The van life I followed when you started posting about van life, I was like, oh, I want to do this.
Van life was one of those things that I knew I needed to do, but I didn't get what the lesson was until I was done. And so van life started 3 years ago. And ultimately the lesson is like what I'm here to talk about, which is how to live through uncertainty, because I think that's what everybody wants right now, is to feel a little bit of confidence in the chaos.
Yeah. Everyone being like, we're in unprecedented times. And I keep making the joke, I would love precedented times. I'm done with unprecedented. I want normal times.
I want some like boring stuff. I want to turn on C-SPAN for napping only. I have dreams.
I don't want to wake up every day and be like, what fresh hell am I going to experience today in the world?
Seriously. And then you add the complication of going to work and wondering what's going to happen there. And I don't know how anyone could be thriving.
I'm not. We're working on that though. But today we will dig into the certainty piece of it, because I feel like that can unpack a lot about how to actually thrive in your workplace and what your employees could be totally missing out on. But before we get to that, I'm asking every guest this season, and the answers have been so funny to this question, candidly, that the episodes I've already recorded. But what's one truth about work you wish more leaders understood?
That you actually have to learn how to be a leader.
What, doesn't happen naturally?
This is a soapbox I will forever stand on, because we live in a employer world in which a lot of people lead, but a very, very small percentage were ever taught anything about how to grow people, how to be a decent human being. I mean, we're going all the way back to like what your mama did to you. We do not have a society that is growing great leaders, and the consequence are all of the problems that we blame on recruiting.
Oh, that is such a hot take, because it's very true. I always joke, like, you don't just wake up and suddenly become this like magnificent leader. There's like years of work. I feel like I've spent 10 plus years managing people now, and I feel like every day I'm still like, oh, I could be a better manager. Oh, I could be a better leader. Oh, I could keep trying.
And the worst part of that formula is the thing that we give the largest weight is being good at your job, and being good at your job and being a leader are not correlated in any way towards success.
No. And also we have a lot of really bad leaders in this world.
And bad leaders ruin your ability to do the work. And so it's just this like really fucked up cycle where we keep running in circles, and then we point fingers at each other. And a lot of times I find myself in these conversations when people are just trying to figure out who to blame. And I'm like, no, you got hurt. Somebody hurt you.
That phrase, hurt people, I think about that phrase at least once a week. Because when someone's being mean to someone, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, are you well? Like, you're clearly not. And then you're taking it out on all of us. And I don't think that's like preferred. It's not for me.
Exactly. Well, and it's a consequence of a lot of resentful yes, which is usually the first half of everyone's career. And that's probably a whole new topic that we could talk about
next
for
season.
An hour.
You will come back next season and we'll talk about it then. Today, though, we're focused on employees just want to feel certain. So let's start there. Why do you think humans crave certainty so much, especially in the workplace?
So the data just on humans and their craving for uncertainty blew my mind when I started kind of digging into it, because I realized that uncertainty was that key that was triggering my anxiety constantly. It wasn't that I was always anxious. It's that I was anxious because I didn't know what was coming. And the reality is that humans as a whole, they would choose a negative outcome over not knowing what's ahead. And so they've done these research studies where they've said, okay, I'll give you $50 or I'll give you a 50-50 chance at $5,000. And the majority of people will pick the $50. It's the same reason why people hold onto their savings account instead of investing in the stock market, even though the 20-year return rate is solid. Very few people lose money over a 20-year return, yet a certain amount of people will never invest in the stock market because they don't like the uncertainty. And then you bring all these uncertain people into the workplace, and you add the context of not knowing when there's a layoff, not knowing when you'll get promoted, not knowing when you'll get more money, and I can keep going. And we basically set up the stakes for a lot of people to be really unsuccessful at work or anywhere else in their life because they're anxious constantly.
Oh gosh, I'm like really thinking about this. I'm like, would I take the $5 over the 50-50 chance? I feel like I have a little bit of like a gambling personality. I don't gamble, to be very clear, because I know I would get addicted to it. And so I was like, would I take the 50-50? But the stock market thing, I mean, makes sense. My dad was one of those like invest in the 401k, invest in the 401k. Like that was his investment strategy. And I think it's really interesting, like looking at the state of the world today and being like, what games are we playing, kind of like what risk are we willing to take? And I think when it comes to work, like the thing you wake up every day to do, I don't think a lot of people want, like you said, don't want to take that risk.
I mean, let's think about the job search, okay? Whenever I tell people about the job search, I always ask them to remember that feeling of opening up the internet and typing in your job title and hitting enter.
Yeah.
And the gap between the moment when you say, I don't know if I like this job, and I'm willing to look for something else is a lot bigger than anyone talks about. Because, if you're at a job that's somewhat reliable, where you get paid enough money to live, and you don't hate it, like deeply in your gut, you're not going. Not unless the opportunity comes to you.
Yeah.
And I think it holds so many of us in place, this fear of, well, that known unknown, or the unknown known. I don't even know, right? Like it's the layers of known and unknown sandwiched together. And ultimately what I've seen over and over again, and I speak for myself and a lot of friends, where it has to become a living hell before you're willing to take a risk.
Yeah.
And that means that we have people getting progressively more scared, more fearful as they go up in their career. And again, not a formula for the best leadership in the world.
No, but like, have you ever had a leader who made you feel safe and certain? Like even when things were unclear?
I was so lucky that actually one of my first great managers. So backstory here is I went to college. I got a really awful job right out of school. I was a tutor at a Kaplan tutoring center.
Okay.
And it was an awful job because you worked from 10 to 8, Tuesday through Saturday, and they paid not enough money to live in the DC area. I had to live with my parents. It was not a good time.
Slept on my brother's couch for 6 months in DC. I get it.
It was so bad.
Sorry, you got recruited.
By the way, they still pay the same amount that they paid me back in 2008. That's the even more disgusting part. In Northern Virginia. I digress. Right.
For another day.
My second job was at a HR technology startup, and my manager hired one of the early VPs of marketing from Netflix. Her name is Camille Watson, and she is a brilliant woman. And she's honestly the person that I really think about, her and the person who recruited me to that company. I think about them all the time, and I could get teary about how grateful I am to them, because it wasn't perfect. But they created this model in which they noticed all of us. They noticed our talents and allowed us to gradually navigate toward great opportunity. And I think the thing she did that was most powerful for me as a kid who had been on 3 airplanes up to that point in my life, who had never been to a sushi restaurant when I was 23 years old, okay? I was raised by a bunch of rednecks in the South. Like, I needed to grow a lot, and she let me grow. And when things went wrong, when they did start laying off people and we ran out of money, she didn't hide that yellow envelope from us. She brought it into the room and she explained to us how layoffs work instead of that constant hiding. And she set a tone for me as a leader that I would always be uncomfortably honest with my team, mostly when the bad things happen, instead of over-promising the good and only talking about good, thinking that would help me build trust.
Yeah. I probably, maybe that's why I like feel like I relate so much to your content. Maybe I feel like I knew that deeply about you because I feel the same way. Like you can't build trust and assuage people's fear with like false positivities. And I think that like that lesson, you learning it so early, I feel like I also learned it from a very early boss, probably a bit to the hard side where he was very direct and transparent in ways that like almost made me a little too uncomfortable. But it's something I've tried to carry into my leadership in other areas as well. As like you can, when some things aren't clear, you can still be honest that you don't know too. Like I think that's the other piece is a lot of leaders think like, oh, I'll fake it till I make it. And it's like, no, people can see right through that.
Yes, I think the 3 most powerful words in leadership are I don't know.
Then why are people like, do you ever, people don't like doing that though? What do you think stops people from doing that?
Well, because we live in a society where we want certainty, we
Yeah.
crave certainty. And so when someone implies that they don't know, I think we're coached from a very early age to say, if you don't know, I shouldn't trust you.
Mm,
And those 2 things and allowing to sit in what I call the messy middle
yeah.
is something that you either have to have a lot of therapy or really, really emotionally intelligent parents to be able to instill that in a child, let alone a teenager who is navigating this world, let alone a 20-year-old who's making a decision they think will navigate their entire life, right? We want to know and we reject not knowing, even though we know that it is a mandate
Yeah.
ultimately.
Ugh. Okay. So you talked about somebody who made you feel safe and certain. How do you lead when you don't have all the answers?
It's really hard because I grew up in a military family. Okay. And I add that context because I don't even think we realize how much having rigidity, structure, and a military like upbringing impacts how you show up as an adult. I mean, as I'm starting to unwind it, like it goes down to my hair and what I wear when I show up to things and how I think I'm supposed to look, all the way down to what I think I'm supposed to do, which is when you're a leader, you should have all the instructions, you should have all the answers. And the reality is, when I was kind of thrust into this, because I didn't start 3 years media with a big fancy plan, I started it because I had an awful manager. I almost instantly needed support. I bring on people who are really junior, who didn't always know how to lead themselves. And honestly, I think my leadership approach is a lot like, we fuck around and find out around here, because what I know to be true is that the way corporate America leads teams doesn't work. It doesn't work. It sets people up to either doubt themselves or to doubt the world. And that is a side effect of capitalism. Because capitalism benefits from a bunch of people who are too scared to run. And so what I try to do with my team is show them the moments when I'm wiping off my shoulders, my elbows, because I just bit it really, really hard. And instead of projecting confidence, I know that I don't have to do that. I did it a lot early on, but I can lead with truth. And what happens next is something so beautiful, because you watch that people are willing to let you see their truth. And what they create from that place is so much greater than any instruction I could provide. even if I was the smartest person in the whole world, which I'm not.
Yeah. I feel like I'm in like a therapy session right now with you. I'm like, why is this making me so emotional? Like,
Well, honestly, that's why I'm writing this book. It's not about the traditional HR. It's not about recruiting. It's about the fact that I was blessed enough to have the therapy and the coaches and all the people who helped me leap into uncertainty. And now that I get to live on the other side of these like 3 years in which I threw my life into a hurricane while running a business, while the world was doing everything it was doing, it's like I want to bring that to people because I know that it feels different to live my life now. And we all deserve to remove that doubt and to like live whole.
I love that. I'm like actually getting emotional as you explain that. I feel like I love uncertainty. I don't know why. I've done like 4 startups, and I don't know if I don't think I'm built different. I honestly just think like we just didn't know a lot of things growing up. Like my parents immigrated to the States with like nothing. My dad was a student. By the time I was born, he was like an established professor, but still like one working parent. I feel like there was a lot in the world that we just like didn't know. And our family just like rolled with it. Which like, and I, as an adult, I don't know if my parents were like overly emotionally intelligent enough to explain that to me as a kid, but as an adult, I'm just like, sometimes you don't know. You got to go like try it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And like the times I feel like I have tried to like seek certainty, I almost feel like I'm disappointed by the outcome sometimes because I'm like not seeking it for the right reasons, or it wasn't even what I really wanted.
That part. I think so often we set our eyes on this vision of what we're going to be, and it is a failure in leadership to attach yourself to an ending instead of attaching yourself to the next best step. Whether you're developing people, whether right, and it's interesting to hear you say that. I've also always felt like really connected to your content, but for me, it's probably like an attraction to this oppositeness because I was taught to bet on reliable. So my grandmother immigrated here and she was a single parent during the 70s when women couldn't even have bank accounts. She had 3 children and a drunk ex-husband who paid nothing into their household. And so we were conditioned to bet on certainty. My mother joined the military during the 80s because it was the most reliable job she could get. I remember the day that I decided I was going to quit my job and start 3 Years Media. She was actually very sick at the time, and I was at her house caregiving for her. And my manager screamed things at me that were completely inappropriate, told me that I had no talent as a writer and I should not be on his team. With a witness, by the way, so you know he wasn't even embarrassed about it.
Ew.
And I remember, I will never forget as long as I live, hanging up that phone, crying. I mean, the deep grief of realizing that you can't do this anymore. Marching into my mom's living room where she is perched with her hands on pillows because she had just had surgery on both of her hands. She has a very severe case of rheumatoid arthritis. She's watching The Real Housewives. And I say, I'm quitting that job and I'm starting a company. And she said, no, you're not. And I said, yes, I fucking am.
You said, watch me.
I literally 2 weeks from that Monday, I started my business.
Yeah, the breaking point, I don't know. Sometimes when you get to that breaking point, you're like, I don't care what comes next. It has to be better than this. I have been there so many times. I'm like, I am not going to be screamed at again. Anything would be better than this.
Yep. And your willingness to pursue that uncertainty probably gave you a little bit of a gap where you didn't get to the point where I did, where I literally did everything to start a company in 2 weeks. I didn't have any clients. I didn't have a company name. I didn't have a website. I didn't even know what I was going to do, but I sure as hell was not going to work for that man anymore.
Yeah, I can't believe he screamed at you with witnesses. How bold. Like, what is wrong with you?
He was the perfect example of someone who was promoted because he was good at his job. And I was attracted to the role because he was good at his job, right? He was a salesperson.
How do we stop doing that? Like in HR, I just did a panel at Transformer. I literally said that. I said, like, not everyone has to be a manager, but like we can't just falsely promote these people because they end up doing so much harm to our organization. And we as HR should speak up and be like, no, I think so-and-so is just a good seller. I think so-and-so is just a good individual contributor. And we should carve that path instead of doing harm to all our employees.
Seriously. So I have two thoughts on this. Number one, there are kind of two things that I think we need to do IQ tests on, and neither of them have to do with like general intelligence, which is how we pre-screen most people. Two IQ tests I would dream of seeing: a leadership IQ test, literally a management. How do you manage people? How would you handle this scenario kind of IQ test? And the second one is interviewing, because you shouldn't be leading a team if you can't recruit, interview, and actually have a conversation to know that someone is qualified. Second answer to that is what you are describing is my biggest aspiration for AI. My vision, my big audacious dream, which full transparency, I think is probably 5, 10, 15 years away. We're not even close right now. Is what we're able to do is take all of these task managers that we have, Basecamp, all of the little things that we're checking boxes and telling systems what we're doing, that we could pull all of those tasks and ultimately very clearly understand what percentage of a person's job can be automated and what percentage of their job cannot be automated. Then be able to move into a world, because that ultimately means we got a lot of 60% people. And we start to create paths for skill, meaning you're good at your job, and paths for people who are really good people managers. Teams get bigger, and they are led by two people, a task manager and a people manager. And we create this balance where we have someone who's really good at managing the development of people, giving good feedback, coaching, creating learning paths and growth paths, and like really thinking about what makes people happy at work. And then this other side where they can just nerd the hell out on being great and have access to someone who is great at their job. Because I think what's happening right now with recruiting is we're doing the shrinking. We've said, okay, recruiters are 60%, which another conversation, but I don't think that's true. However, they are being treated that way. Now they're reporting to finance officers, they're reporting to accountants, and we have this group of recruiting professionals who had no education coming into it, or only the education of doing the work, who have no access to anyone who can help them. And they rely on people like us to like do blogs and webinars to help, when it's like, no, that is not the tactical consulting support you need to take best in class and make it best for you.
Yeah. There's a place in hell. I know we're not supposed to say things like this, but it's my podcast, so I'll say it. There's a place in hell for people who are mean to recruiters. That is all I'm going to say. When people are like, we don't need recruiters, we can replace them. I'm like, please shut your mouth, because that is not the case.
Anyone who says hiring is easy is an asshole. Maybe that's my hot take.
No, I am with you. That's not even a hot take. I'm like, you think hiring people is easy? What? People can't even, okay, so like, let's use the popular analogy, hiring is like dating, right? People can't even date correctly. You think people are going to hire people correctly? Our bias is like our natural instinct to go find someone like us.
Exactly. Not to mention all of these companies that are like automating the recruiting process. And I'm like, you're working with the most unpredictable variable in the world. People.
Humans. Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck, bro. Right? This is an Uber.
You have to come back for another episode. There's another episode here about recruiting where I could just spill the beans on how awful I was at recruiting years ago, and how I've like tried to really learn from the best recruiters in the world how to do this job. And still there are days where I'm like, oh my God, this is people's entire careers. Like, I definitely think I lean more on the HR side than the recruiting side, because recruiting is hard. Capital H. I don't think I appreciated it as much as I ever did in this current moment of my life than I do in this moment.
Okay, I'm a job post writer, and I have hired the wrong person before. Okay? So if I can do it, anyone can do it.
Anyone can do it. Okay, let's get back to our clarity, because I want to give people like something to think about as they're thinking about like day-to-day leadership. What does creating clarity actually look like in the day-to-day moments of leadership?
You know, I think it's a lot about changing the questions we ask, and really getting into scenarios where we can allow people to show their vulnerability and their uncertainty. One of the big shifts I've made over the last year that transformative for my team, okay, is when I ask, do you feel confident that you can get this done? Or do you know what you're doing? I add at the end of that question on a scale of 1 to 10. Always clarifying. 1 means I have no idea what you're asking me to do, and 10 meaning 100, I can get this done in an hour. Stop talking. I'm done here, right? And what I have found is that when I offer that window to my team, they will tell me exactly where they're at. And the best part is I can actually ask a follow-up question before I get the work back to me, and it's not even right.
Huh. I never thought about adding the 1 to 10 scale. I usually just ask like an affirmative, do you have everything you need?
Same. I did that forever. And then I kept getting stuff back that was like not what I was thinking, or not even, it was close, but not quite, or right. Because in my world, I'm running my own business and I have a very distinct vision. I always kind of know what I want, but I don't know until I see it. And by, right. And when they say like, I'm at like a 4, because I need clarity on this. I want to know an example. Can you show me da da da? And it just creates that space where I kind of know I'm going to get something half baked, or I'm going to get something pretty close to done. And the follow up there too helps get us closer, which is I can say, all right, you're at a 4. What can I do to get you to a 5?
Yeah. And you can actually manage. And it's so interesting. So I was like, wouldn't the employees just like overinflate their score for like fear? But like you've clearly built trust with your team because they're not overinflating the scores. That's like where my mind first went. I was like, oh my God, I bet you there's someone out there that's like 10, 10 every time they're saying 10 and then they're delivering to you something that's like not 10. But clearly you've like set those expectations with them correctly and given them clarity because they trust you enough to say, I'm at a 4, I'm at a 5.
Because I tell them when I screw it up.
Yeah.
There's never a time in which we have to wonder who's to blame. I am to blame if something goes wrong.
Yeah.
They are very, very clear on that. If you work for me and something goes horribly wrong, I own at least 50% of what happened, because it is my responsibility to help you understand expectations, to follow up and check in when necessary, and at the end to Q&A what we can do better. I mean, I have a giant sign next to my desk, like just outside of you right now, that says this shop has worked 0 days without a fuck up. Right? Because we set the baseline at, things are going to go wrong.
Always.
The only responsibility that I hold people accountable to is learning what they need to learn to not make the same mistake over and over again.
Yeah.
And in van life, that was, I had to learn how to patch a tire because it seemed like there was a magnet on my tires for screws. And every other day it was like, I have a low pressure tire. I have to learn how to do this. And it was like, there was this little mental model of like, okay, if we learn how to fix it, we can keep going. And I sat down with my team and I'm like, all right, so if there's learning, education, a course, a whatever you can take, I will pay you to learn.
Yeah.
But I will not pay you to make the same mistake over and over again and keep doing it.
Yeah. That's such a good point. Like it's so interesting watching people make mistakes in the workplace, how they take accountability. You can tell a lot from a person on how they take accountability for a mistake. If they're scared to, clearly they've worked in like a fear operated system. If they very openly, like when I mess up things, I very openly like laugh about them. In a newsletter, instead of writing generational shifts, I wrote generational shits. I told the entire team, I was like, whoops, made the funniest typo this today. But it's like simple things like that. I'm like, life, I don't know. I've had some really toxic, terrible managers. So like life is too short to like make people scared to make mistakes. You want people to make them, but like over and over again, no. But to make them and admit they made them once, yes.
And that is such a balance to work on because of what you just said. Every person I hire has had a toxic manager. I don't know that anybody has made it out of corporate alive without somebody beating them down so hard.
We need like a support group for it. I don't know a single person in my life either who has not had one awful manager. Back to our original point, everyone shouldn't be a manager, and this is why, because we can't even name anybody who hasn't had a toxic manager.
And don't you think, like, why is there not a fire lit under our asses about how we improve our ability and every single person in our company's ability to manage uncertainty? And what I found, and when I started working on this, I was kind of talking to some of my clients and I was like, maybe we could do a workshop and whatever. And what I found is a lot of these organizations are not willing to say, I am taking you into uncertainty. They think being an employer of choice or the great place to work means I make a promise to you that you'll have a job forever. And we both pretend that I can promise you that and that we're leading you confidently into the future.
But that's so unrealistic. Maybe I'm just this way because I've worked at 4 startups, truly. Like, I've just gotten used to it being a shit show no matter what. But I'm also just like, when you are honest and authentic with people and you don't set them up with these unrealistic expectations and you make it clear that like there are things we could be uncertain about here, but we're all going to work on it together. Don't you think the employees then can actually do better work?
Because literally we're taking up our brain wondering what the hell is going to happen. Like if you've ever been woken up at 3:00 in the morning with anxiety, you know what I'm talking about, where it's like you can't sleep because you're thinking. You can't work, create, do your best work if you're thinking too hard about stuff you cannot control that your manager isn't willing to communicate to you.
Yeah. I mean, okay, look, I talk about communication a lot. Like, probably too much. Honestly, in another life, maybe I was like a head of comms for a global company because it's just now become a soapbox I'm on because I have this like theory that like we're all bad at communicating. Like the attention is so low right now because we're thrown in a million different directions. It's really hard. But when we're talking about uncertainty, you cannot forget that communication piece. Can we talk about like a time where you saw communication, either good or bad, actually shape how the team handled that uncertainty?
100%. Actually, the manager who forced me into being an entrepreneur is the perfect example.
Hate that guy.
Because months before this, right, this little like build-up moment started probably in September.
Ooh.
And I didn't start my company until February. So I had a full 6 months of hell.
Oh, God.
And the day that I noticed it was when we were in a group meeting. And mind you, I'm working at a global, huge company at the time, and I'm on a creative team. And so I am a technical copywriter for employer branding. That was like my official job title at the time. And I worked side by side with a graphic designer who is one of the most talented graphic designers I've worked with in my entire life. Okay. And we're doing employer brand for a company you would definitely know the name of. And we're coming up with our concepts. They make sneakers. I'll leave it at that. And we were working on this design. And if you're thinking of the same sneaker company as I am, they are amazing copywriters. They are incredible designers. We all remember and we know to just do it. So we're working on the design and he starts to give feedback and I'm noticing a tone shift. And then he just gets nasty with this designer over something that's like not worth getting crappy over. It's like change the green to yellow or you know what I mean? Like it was simple instructions and I followed up afterwards. And I asked the designer, like, is this a thing? like, is this a all the time energy? Because I hadn't really experienced, I was new to the team.
That's right.
I like hadn't really seen what was going. And he was like, oh yeah, he'll pick his target and he just goes for it.
Why? Like, I could not imagine waking up one day and just like being a dick to people. Probably because there's a lot to unpack here. Probably because I haven't been given the privilege in my life to be an asshole. But also maybe the choice of I don't want to be an asshole. Like,
yeah,
actively want to be a good person.
And what was happening is the manager was being put under pressure to sell projects. It was the first employer brand division in a global staffing firm, and he was under a lot of pressure to hit these numbers. And he thought if we worked through this project faster, we would be able to take on this new one and all of these things. And instead of just communicating with us, hey, we need to keep this project on timeline, here's what I need, et cetera, he took out his frustration on everyone. And it just became this constant circle where everyone was scared and it slowed them down, right? And ultimately that team doesn't exist anymore, or it does now with a completely different leader and a completely different team, because he was ultimately unsuccessful because not only could he not communicate with us, but he couldn't communicate with his clients confidently or truthfully. And you and I both know you could always sense when someone is frustrated or annoyed.
Yeah.
Like very few people can contain that energy.
Yeah, you can always tell my face. There's always there's a face I make, apparently, according to a lot of people.
Same. I remember one of my early managers, we were in Vegas and someone asked me a question. I told them, I tried to like make it up, and he was like, no poker. No poker.
He like fakes them out. I'm not intending to anyways. I find that like, so I had a boss once who used to joke we didn't know what version of them we were going to get. And like when you were telling the story about him and the like the yelling at people, I'm sure the outcome of that was like everybody then didn't know how to act. The uncertainty of not even, first of all, there's like the uncertainty of the world, the uncertainty of the work. Now there's like that added layer of the uncertainty of the person. Yes. What version am I going to get of them today was like a joke we used to make about one of my managers. But now I'm thinking through it and I'm like, that changed how I operated every day. And that is a form of uncertainty I don't think anyone should have to live through, to be honest. It sucks.
Yes, because like we've been saying a little bit all through this, and even before we even started, is it's like, it's okay to fuck up. Anyone who holds you to a standard in which you cannot make a mistake cannot be a leader. It's just not realistic. And not to mention, at the time we were working on these reports that were like 60 to 80 pages while we're doing candidate experience audits and analysis. And if you think you're going to get 80 slides with very detailed charts on them with not a one mistake, come on. It's just unrealistic.
That's wild. I'm glad you got out. 6 months though, that's enough to need therapy after that.
Deeply. Honestly, when I first got into this business, I remember I wrote on a whiteboard, your best is good enough. Because when I left that job, I had this panic that I was always going to make a mistake, that whatever I did wasn't worth it to the client, that I was going to fail, all of this stuff. And it took a lot of doing great work and having incredible clients who were so appreciative of that work and the creativity. And I just got really, really lucky that I had clients who could see what I was capable of and like let my insecurity exist while also allowing me to be great.
Yeah. Every time I've like left a toxic situation or like just a really bad one, I feel like I need, first of all, like a retreat to go to because I'm so burnt out from it. And that question, that comment of like, your best is good enough. I feel like when you've survived a toxic boss or a really bad environment, you almost are just like more burnt out so much easier. And it's like hard to build that resilience. And so how did you do that? Like you spent 6 months being, I'm going to exaggerate here, maybe being terrorized by this manager. How do you come back from that and figure out like, how do I move forward?
The first thing I did is I burned myself out worse by beating myself up, believing that every single thing I did was important. A friend of mine earlier this week said, we're all juggling, but you decide which balls are plastic and which ones are glass. And I juggled the shit out of all of that because I was worried about making money. I was worried about what was next, right? All of this stuff. And ultimately what ended up happening is about 5 years into my business, I had everything I thought I wanted. I had a business that doubled every single year for the first 5 years. I had a great team. I had a business model. I was investing. I was not scared, but I didn't like my life. I didn't like me. I had this like view of the Rockies from my apartment in Colorado, and it made me feel nothing. And it was because I poured so much out that I had nothing left. And for me, my growth comes through extremes. So that sounds like Okay, you get it then. Because, so like in my 20s, I decided I wanted to start working out. So I didn't go to the gym or hire a trainer. I signed up for a Tough Mudder. And if you're not familiar, that's a 10 to 15-mile obstacle race, usually at a ski slope, going backwards. Okay? Because I literally was like, yo, if you don't work out, you're going to die. So get it. And you better believe I did. Right? And I've been working out ever since. But that's how my brain works. And I think that's an important kind of benchmark is like, your way isn't my way. Like, you don't need to go live in a van. By the way, I had never gone camping before I decided to live in a van. Like, I
You're a
leap,
fascinating human. You're a fascinating human.
but I need that because I will not change unless I am stretched and challenged because I was taught to jump on curiosity and resilience. And so I think the thing for everyone is to understand your own conditions of change, to understand what you need to feel safe, to allow yourself. And like one of my little life hacks is I write what I need, what I feel, and what I want. So whenever I feel that like your brain just leaped into the anxious mode or you're really panicked about what to do and you're not sure, I find that if I just kind of like march myself through that, I feel angry, I feel nervous, I feel this because I want this. The need becomes very obvious. I need a change. I need to not just take the next step on this same path that I'm on. I need a whole different, and this gets into faith and allowing space, but I truly believe that when you allow yourself to trust in a divine energy that will put you in the right place, and I do not care what you call it, because I feel like all energy is divine in its way, if you believe, is that you will be guided toward the thing that's next for you. You never end up somewhere you don't belong. And believe me, getting in a van will make you believe that you've ended up in a lot of places you did not belong in.
I love the energy and the manifestation is like so real. You're right. I don't care what you call it. I think it does, like when you're thinking about it in the broader scheme of life, I think it does contribute to like what path should I be on and where do I want to go and how do I get there? And I think you hit on a very real point of like your appetite for something could be so different from like your team, your company, your leader's appetite for something. And I think that's something that's just like genuinely lost in the world of working is like how you operate is going to be your default. That is nobody else's default. And so like I have a high risk for uncertainty. You have a high risk for uncertainty. My team might not have a high risk for uncertainty. They might want context on every single thing and why. And I think when we like talk about employees, we have to remember that employees, especially like not just HR leaders, employees especially are like watching a very scary world in the world of like what is happening. Layoffs are still like they're watching all of that and they're scared and they want certainty at work. But like just because you and I have an appetite for more doesn't mean they're going to be okay with it either. Just because
Yeah.
we have faith that like we'll be fine doesn't mean that your employees have it either. And I think that nuance is lost so often because we're moving so quickly. We're experiencing life in so many different ways that we sometimes forget, hey, somebody else is having a very different experience than me.
But I think that you and I, because we have looked so deeply and actually given ourselves a chance to know who we are, how we handle this, what we're willing to do, I think it does inspire and motivate other people to try to figure their shit out. And that is what leadership is. It's not fixing it. It's not always figuring out the finish line. I think sometimes it's going backwards, sideways, in whatever direction you need to allow people to simply move. Because the most dangerous thing that we do is allow people to become stale and sit there and sit in their panic. And what happens next is the burnout.
Yeah, but there's a whole other episode we have to do on resilience and burnout because we could talk about that forever. Resilience is built from really hard moments. There's like a book behind me. I think it's like The 5 Habits of Highly Resilient People, and the author makes it very clear. She's a doctor. Like you're not just born with resilience. You have to experience some really hard stuff, some really bad things, and then you end up building your resilience. And so I think like you've had a toxic manager, I've had a toxic manager. I'm like that sucked. To be clear, I had to go to a lot of therapy to get over that. But it also, I think, like really built me up in moments where I look around and I'm like, oh, I forget that not everybody has gone through the same things I've gone through. to get to
Yep.
where I am. And like, I've been asking myself the question since I was like 13, like, who am I? I was like that existential teenager, like trying to like write in her journal, like, who am I? Here are all the things I'm going to be someday. Like, right.
Yep.
And
Right.
I think it helped me be a leader. I just think a lot of our leaders don't ask themselves those questions and are put in leadership positions because they're respected or they fit a certain profile. So they're given these jobs and they've never had to ask themselves, who am I?
Exactly, because a bunch of people thought that the opposite of uncertainty is certainty, and it's not. It is trust.
Dang, that is so good. That's a mic drop moment. Minda Harts, who I love, is writing a book about trust in the workplace, and I can't wait to see what is going to be said about uncertainty too, because I think that relationship is so interesting to me.
Yeah,
And
and
we've
it's a
made
must-have, but never a must-taught, never a must-educated, a must-trained, but
oh,
highly influential teams have trust.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, I love ending episodes on like advice and the future. Just a little advice moment. What do you think is one thing that leaders often get wrong when they try to provide certainty?
Ooh. I think where leaders get it wrong is being overconfident in the certainty instead of allowing margins of error. So a lot of times what we see is they project confidence without giving context. And I think it's really, really simple to just provide the context you have that informs your decision instead of just trying to decide the ending and expecting people to navigate there on their own.
I'm just laughing because that just feels so real to me. The confidence of like, we'll get there, we can do it, we're gonna be right. I'm like, nah, I'd rather you be like, I'm not really sure about this, but we're gonna try it. And I say that probably like the person on my team could tell you that. I say that at least like once a week. I'm like, I'm not sure, but we'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, but let's try it.
My VA would tell you, I changed my mind. She would tell you that is probably the phrase I say the most often is, I think I changed my mind. She's like, let's go.
I love that because it's this idea that we have to control everything. I think also just completely drains creative spirit and innovation. I think there's nothing, maybe this is like a crazy thing to say, but like there's no such thing as like true control. There's always things that we're not going to be able to decide as HR, as TA, as leaders, as CEOs, as founders, as people navigating this world. And so I feel like when leaders try to default to control is almost just so stifling for anybody who's truly trying to create something.
And in retrospect, and I think you'll agree on this, I think it's usually a sign that they are very immature.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that because I have a friend who's doing research around CEO personality types. And one of the, so you're nodding your head, one of the common things that comes up is CEOs are most common like control types. And that's why venture capitalists tend to give money to like certain personality types and usually tends to be like control types. I don't want to get ahead of her research. I definitely want to share it someday because I think she's working on it right now. But I think that's just so interesting. Like everything we just talked about, and I just said most CEOs are control types, and now I'm going to have to like think about that for a bit.
I mean, if you read Ta-Nehisi Coates, who I think is one of the like most forward thinking people in this time on power, you know, what it'll tell you is that people who have lived in a system where every system was built for them will never understand that. It is really hard to shine the light on a system that was built for you and to understand that it was not built for everyone else. And when you look at the demographics of CEOs in the United States of America, you can understand why that consequence has happened.
Absolutely. I think anyone listening has heard me talk about that. It's fascinating. You're definitely coming back for a part 2. Sorry to voluntold you on an episode, but I would love because there's so much more I want to unpack with you. Let's end with what's one message you wish more leaders would repeat to their teams during uncertain times.
I believe in you.
That's so nice. I think I need to hear that more.
I believe in you too.
Thank you. And for anyone else listening, I also believe in all of you, which is why I continue to record these podcast episodes. It's So I will never stop writing a newsletter because I have a lot of feelings and I really believe in HR. I believe in you is a really good one.
It's code for I love you. And it might get weird if you say I love you, but I think we need to talk about love more at work because at the core of great leadership is great love.
That is so beautiful. And sometimes I end Zoom calls with, bye, gotta go, love you. And then afterwards, I'm like, ooh, I just told like 3 employees I love them. Like, I don't think I should be doing that as our head of HR. But it's fun. I'm like, yeah, I love you. I love all of you.
It gets at the source. Like, again, we're humans. We need each other.
Yeah. Also, like, love is like abundant. You have so much of it to give. It's like an endless resource. Just give it. I love all of you.
Exactly.
If you're listening to this, I love you. Maybe don't tell anyone I said that on this podcast. Anyway, I have had so much fun with you today. I definitely see a part 2 in our future. Have just been such a big fan of yours on the internet. Everything you post. I remember when you did van life, I was like, holy shit, I want to do van life. And I'm just really grateful to like be anywhere in your orbit and in your world. For everyone listening, I always link to your LinkedIn wherever you want to send anyone. But if someone listening is like, I must talk to them, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah. So just go to 3, like the number, ears, like the ones on your head, media.com. And you can book a meeting or just shoot me a note and let me know what you think.
I love it. The ears, like on the ones on your head, made me laugh.
There's 3 E's in 3 ears. So when you start typing it, you get to the E, and you're like, wait, did I spell this right? So
this is so fun. Thank you so much for spending time with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.